The experiment begins. Mason stood inside the cold chamber with his hands tight against the control console. Blue light hummed around the room while thick cables pulsed across the floor like veins. Behind the reinforced glass, the alien subject lay motionless on the table. Her skin had a shimmer like glass mixed with metal, smooth yet full of ancient patterns that almost moved when one stared too long. Her name was Rel, a captured soldier from a species known only in whispers. Once, they had ruled regions of the stars with their minds alone, but their time ended when human fleets arrived. Their world burned, their cities fell. Now, this one was all that remained. The last trace of a once proud race. Mason had not asked to be part of this project. He was a biologist, not a weapon maker. But orders were orders. High command wanted results. They wanted this creature enhanced. They wanted to see what would happen if human science touched alien evolution. He had worked for months without sleep, watching, learning, mapping every strand of Rel's strange DNA. It moved differently from human genes, full of branches and loops that reacted to thought and memory. Her biology was built not just to live, but to listen. It responded to feeling, to fear, to pressure. Now, the upgrade was ready. Mason had built a system that combined human nanotech with her neural structure. It would boost her reaction time, expand her strength, enhance her senses, and maybe even unlock something deeper inside her mind. He knew the risks, but he also saw the possibility. She could become something new, something powerful. He stepped away from the console and looked at her again. Her chest rose slowly. Her eyes stayed closed. For now, he took a breath and pressed the activation key. The machines around her came alive. Tiny drones moved like insects across her skin, thin silver needles inserted into her temples. The chamber filled with white light. Her body jerked. Not in pain, not in panic, but like something inside her had been woken up. Mason watched every monitor. Her heartbeat changed rhythm. Her brain waves shot up then leveled out. Her muscle tone shifted. New cells formed under her skin like armor. Her blood changed color. He whispered to himself that it was working. It was working better than he expected. Then, something strange happened. Her brain activity rose again. But this time not in normal patterns. The lines moved in waves. Not random but steady, like sound. Like speech. Mason leaned closer. The monitors began showing strange symbols. Not from his system, not from human code. It was something being sent from inside her. The light in the chamber flickered. Her fingers twitched. Her lips moved. Then she opened her eyes. They were no longer the color of silver. They were deep green with small golden rings spinning slowly at the center. She looked directly at Mason. Not at the glass. Not at the light, but right at him. She sat up slowly. No pain in her face. No fear. Mason tried to speak, but the microphone system went down. Static filled his earpiece. The lights overhead dimmed for a moment, then returned. She tilted her head. Then she spoke. The words were soft, in a language he had never heard. But the tone was clear, calm, focused. He stepped back and opened the manual override. The chamber should have stayed locked. It was set to full containment. But the system ignored his commands. The chamber door slid open on its own. Rel stepped down from the table. Her movements were fluid, balanced, too perfect. Mason raised his hands to show peace. She watched him for a long second, then took a step closer. Her voice returned, this time slower. She pointed at her head, then her chest. She said 2 words in broken English. "You changed." Mason nodded slowly. He tried to explain that it was meant to help, that she was supposed to become better, stronger, more stable. She said nothing. just kept watching him. Suddenly she turned, looked toward the far wall, as if hearing something through the steel. Her body stiffened. Her eyes narrowed. Then she whispered more words in her own language. Mason caught just a single sound. One word that repeated. He searched the translation system for a match. The result came up in red. Echo. Before he could react, the lights burst into bright white. The walls of the lab vibrated. Every machine in the room surged with energy. Rel dropped to one knee. Her hands pressed against her head. She gasped. Her skin shimmered again. The patterns began moving faster. Her muscles flexed on their own. Mason ran to her. He reached out but stopped. She looked up. Her face was different now, more serious, more aware. Her voice was deeper. Something is speaking through me. Mason stared in silence. The weight of his mistake pressed against his chest. He had upgraded her body. He had triggered her evolution. But in doing so, he had opened something else. Something ancient. Something waiting. And now it was awake. Changes run deeper than expected. The medical wing felt different now. The same steel walls, the same blinking lights, the same quiet buzz of machines, but everything seemed heavier. As if the air itself knew something had changed. Mason sat near the observation screen, watching Rel move around the isolated chamber. She was no longer the fragile subject he had first scanned weeks ago. Her every step showed strength. Her reflexes were sharper than any enhanced soldier he had seen. Her posture was balanced like a trained fighter, but also full of something more, something not human. Rel walked without hesitation. Her eyes scanned corners before her body even turned. She could hear faint signals from outside the chamber. Mason had tested this himself. He whispered a few words into a low-frequency mic 3 rooms away. She spoke those same words back to him with perfect clarity. Her muscles reacted faster than sensors could track. When he tossed a thin needle through the air, she caught it with 2 fingers without looking. She had no hesitation, no pause, no mistake. Yet this was not the problem. The problem was her face. Her expression had changed, not just once, but again and again. Sometimes she looked calm and curious. Then, moments later, her mouth would tighten, her eyes would focus, and her entire body would tense like a soldier ready for war. Then she would blink, relax, and stare at the lights again, as if nothing had happened. It was as if 2 versions of her were living in the same body, one exploring, one remembering. Mason kept checking the data. Her body temperature had increased slightly. Her brain activity spiked randomly at moments that made no sense. She would stop moving and just freeze in place, then whisper something in her own language, then move again. He watched recordings from the security cameras. Rel would touch the walls of the chamber with her hands flat. Then she would lean in close as if listening to voices inside the metal. Mason felt the weight of his mistake. He opened the last genetic map he had created. He zoomed into the neural pattern, the one he had modified. The echo node, a cluster of genetic matter inside her brain that had been dormant during her captivity. He had activated it by accident while trying to boost her memory reflex. The node was not just a biological switch, it was a gateway, a relay. He remembered the stories written in fragments during the early war. Reports of her species speaking across worlds without tools. Of entire armies acting as one. No orders, no radios. Just thought, shared instantly. That was before the war burned their cities and destroyed their planet's core. That ability had been silent in Rel, until now. She was hearing something. Not from the base. Not from Earth, but from somewhere far older. Rel sat quietly on the floor now, legs folded, eyes closed. Her body perfectly still. Mason stepped into the room. No alarms triggered, no lockdowns activated. He had taken full control of the chamber earlier and shut off the automatic systems. He needed to understand her without interference. Rel opened her eyes. She looked at him without surprise. He asked her how she felt. She said the voices were not loud now, only soft whispers. He asked what they were saying. She paused for a moment, then replied that they do not use words like humans. They show things. They send feelings, images, old memories. He asked whose memories. She said they feel like hers, but also not hers. Mason sat beside her. She told him the upgrade had changed her body. That was true. Her strength had grown. Her senses had sharpened. Her speed had increased. But the change inside her mind was something she had not expected. She said when she sleeps, she sees battles she never fought, cities she never visited, stars she never passed. But each time she wakes, those images stay with her. She told him she could now sense the emotions of others, not in clear thoughts, but in waves. When he was near her, she felt guilt, regret, curiosity. He confirmed it without hesitation. He told her what he did was not approved. He had gone beyond orders. He wanted to prove that enhancement could do more than just create weapons. He wanted to show that science could give lost species a second chance. She listened without judgment. Then she said something that sent a chill through Mason's spine. She said sometimes the voices become angry. Not just sad or lost, but angry. And when they become louder, things around her react. She told him 2 lights in the ceiling burst during her last dream. The sound systems failed the moment she woke. She asked if it was her doing. Mason did not know, but he had a strong guess. He told her the mind of her people was once shared across vast distances. That maybe the node he activated did more than just reconnect her to memory. Maybe it reconnected her to the remains of that mind. A memory that still wanted to live. She stood up and walked to the wall again. Her hand touched the steel. She closed her eyes. She whispered something again, but this time in English. They remember pain. Mason asked her if she meant the war. She nodded, slowly, then said they do not blame humans. Not all of them. Only the ones who wanted to erase their existence. Only the ones who ordered the final strike. Mason felt his heart tighten. That order had come from Earth Command, the same people funding this lab. He stood and asked her if she felt in control. Rel turned around and looked at him closely. She said, not always. Sometimes she feels herself slipping. Sometimes the other memories try to pull her mind apart. Then she added something else. She said the upgrades gave her power, but they also opened a gate, one she cannot close alone. Mason stood frozen in silence. He realized now that the experiment had worked. She was stronger. She was more advanced, but she was also no longer alone. And whatever was inside her mind, whatever lived in those echoes, it was not done yet. Her mind as splintering grail stood in the center of the chamber. Her eyes closed, her hands pressed flat against the cold floor. Her body looked steady from a distance, but Mason knew something inside her was not right. The stillness was only on the outside. Inside her mind, a storm was building. She had stopped speaking a few hours ago. Number. Response to sound, no answer to her name. She just stayed there, as if her thoughts had become louder than anything around her. Mason watched through the reinforced glass. Sweat gathered on his forehead. He had gone through every file, every recording, every scan of her brain activity. The results made no sense. Waves of memory, emotion, even electric surges were moving through her head like crashing tides. No single person should be able to survive this level of neural pressure. But Rel was still breathing, still alive, He remembered how she had whispered the word echo before. The voice was not hers alone. He turned on the low-frequency sensors and ran another scan. This time, a strange pattern appeared on the screen. It looked like a pulse, repeating slowly across different layers of her brain. Almost like code. He froze as a sudden realization hit him. These were not just memories. These were signals. Timed and structured. They were coming from something beyond her own mind. He checked for any outside transmissions, any signals bouncing from nearby satellites or hidden networks. Nothing. The signals were forming inside her, and spreading outwards, as if her thoughts were no longer just hers. Mason rushed to the manual recorder and began speaking aloud for the system log. He explained that Rel's mind was being influenced by unknown forces. Not random, not instinctive. Organized, deliberate, and growing stronger each hour. Inside the chamber, Rel finally moved. Slowly she stood up. Her head tilted sideways as if listening to something in the air. Then she turned and looked. Directly at the observation window, Mason stepped back. Her eyes had changed again. The golden rings inside them were now spinning faster. Her pupils narrowed. A thin glow surrounded her skin, like soft light trapped under the surface. She placed one hand on the glass and whispered a word that Mason could not understand. The glass under her fingers began to vibrate, not crack, not shake, but hum softly like it was responding to her touch. Mason rushed to the speaker and asked if she could still hear him. Her voice came without delay. She said the voices inside her mind were louder now. Too loud. They did not want silence anymore. They wanted movement. He asked her what they were saying. She said they were remembering the past. They were remembering what had been taken from them. Mason stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. Then she stepped away from the glass. She touched her temple and closed her eyes again. Suddenly, the lights inside the lab dimmed. Every machine on the wall blinked twice and stopped. Screens turned black. Systems froze. A strange static filled the air. Not sound, not electricity. Something colder. Something deeper. Mason felt it. A weight pressing into his chest. His hands began to shake. His ears rang. Then the emergency systems kicked in. Red lights flashed. Alarms echoed across the base. The control room door slammed open. A security officer rushed in, asking what was happening. Before Mason could answer, a surge from the console shocked the officer and threw him against the wall. Rel opened her eyes again. She was not blinking, not breathing heavy. But her presence was stronger now. Mason realized what was happening. The voices were not just speaking through her anymore. They were trying to act through her. He grabbed the medical scanner and rushed toward the emergency override. He needed to sedate her. Not to harm her, but to slow her mind. To stop the connection before it became permanent. But the door to the chamber refused to open. Rel raised her hand again. The floor beneath her began to shift. Small pieces of steel floated upward. No wind, no force. Just thought. She was not using strength. She was using intention. Mason yelled her name, told her to fight it. Told her to hold on to herself. For a second, something changed in her face. Her mouth opened, her eyes widened. She looked scared. Then she whispered something weak, like a plea. I do not want to become them. The steel pieces dropped. Her knees hit the ground. She held her head with both hands and screamed without sound. Mason stared at her, heart pounding. He had never seen someone struggle like this. It was not just a breakdown. It was a war inside her mind. He moved back to the terminal and tried to access the Neuralink system. Maybe if he could connect to her mind, he could see what she was experiencing. He could guide her back. But the system was unstable. Then a message appeared on the screen. Not from any human software. It said one word, written in alien script. But the translation engine gave it meaning. Remember. Mason looked at the chamber again. Rel was still on her knees. Her breathing had slowed. But he could feel it. This was only the beginning. The upgrades had unlocked her potential. But they had also unlocked something else. A broken link was now active, and it was reaching farther than anyone imagined. Humanity is at risk. The base had changed. No longer a quiet research center floating above a dead world. It now felt like a place waiting to explode. Lights flickered without reason. Doors opened and closed without command. Machines acted on their own. The atmosphere felt thicker with every passing hour, like the walls were breathing. Mason stood in the command corridor alone. Most of the other staff had left the base after the system breakdown. Only the emergency team remained behind, and even they stayed away from the lower levels. Nobody wanted to be near Rel. Nobody trusted her anymore. Earth Command had sent a direct message. Terminate the subject. Destroy the data. Seal the experiment. No questions allowed. No time given. They saw her not as life, not even as a test subject, but as a growing threat. Mason did not reply to the message. He deleted it from the system, then locked access with his private key. He had made this mistake. He would not let others erase it without understanding what had been done. He moved down the long corridor toward the old testing wing. That is where Rel had gone after the last surge. The moment the systems crashed, she escaped the primary chamber and disappeared into the deeper halls. She had not attacked anyone. She had not caused harm. But she had taken the core memory unit with her, the one holding every part of her genetic code and every note from the upgrades. She had chosen to hide with knowledge. That was no accident. Mason entered the testing wing, flashlight in hand. The doors responded to his ID without trouble. The air inside felt colder. No sound. Just the hum of power in the walls. He followed the faint trail left behind, marks on the floor, heat signatures barely visible. Then he found her. She sat against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself. Her skin no longer glowed. Her body looked smaller, like it had pulled inward to protect something inside. Mason did not speak at first. He moved closer and sat down across from her. Rel lifted her head slowly. Her eyes met his without fear. He asked her why she ran. She said she did not want to hurt anyone. She said the voices inside her head were no longer just speaking. They were growing. Louder. They were starting to pull her actions without permission. He asked her if she still had control. She shook her head. Not always. Sometimes she could stop them. Sometimes she could not. Sometimes they made her remember things that were never her own. She told him that last night she saw fire falling from the sky, cities breaking apart, children screaming in silence. And she felt the pain as if it was happening again. But those memories were not hers. They belonged to the ones lost before. Her time. Mason listened without interrupting. She said the upgrades made her strong. Too strong, not just in body, in thought, in memory, in connection. The Echo node had not just reactivated old powers. It had rebuilt the path between her and the network of her ancient kind. But that network was broken. The others were gone. Only their echoes remained. Shadows of voices, fragments of minds. They had no bodies, no place to rest. So now they saw her as a new home. Mason stood and walked slowly across the room. He looked out the small viewing window into the stars. He said Earth Command wanted to end the experiment. They believed she was dangerous. They would send a team soon. Maybe a weapon. Maybe something worse. Rel asked him if he agreed with them. He stayed quiet for a moment. Then he turned and said he believed she was becoming something no one understood. Not even herself. But he also believed she had not chosen this alone. He told her he would not let her be erased. She stared at him with tired eyes. Then said something he had not expected. She said there might be a way to stop the voices. Mason leaned in, asked her how. She said the node could be destroyed. But not from outside. It lived too deep inside her. It was wrapped around her thoughts, her memories, her core. No tool could reach it. No scan could remove it. Only she could do it from within her own mind. But if she failed, it would not just silence the voices. It would tear her apart. Mason asked if she was willing to try. She said she did not want to lose herself. But she did not want to become a weapon either. He nodded, then told her there was something else. He showed her a small device from his jacket, a prototype, a neural sync module. He had designed it months ago for joint brain mapping. It could link two minds together for a short time. Enough to guide thoughts. Enough to share direction. He said he could go with her into that memory space. Not physically, but mentally. Just for a few minutes. Long enough to help her find the node. Long enough to help her break it. Rel stared at the device. Then at him. She said if he entered her mind, he might not come back the same. The voices might find him too. Mason said he did not care. She closed her eyes. Took one breath. Then nodded. The final attempt would begin. One chance to shut the gate from inside. They both knew the risk. But there was no time left. If they failed, it would not just be her mind that fell apart. The echo inside her would spread farther. And this time, it would not stop. The chamber lights had been dimmed. Thick cables stretched from the wall to the center platform where Rel stood, silent and still. The neural sync module sat on a small metal tray beside her. Mason checked the settings one last time, hands steady, eyes focused, mind full of thoughts. He tried not to entertain. Failure was possible. Death was possible. But not trying at all, that was something he could never live with. He stepped up onto the platform beside her. Rel looked at him, calm but tired. Her strength was still there, but her body showed signs of stress. Her shoulders had thinned, her skin had dulled slightly, and her voice had grown softer over the last day. The echoes were feeding on her. Her identity was slipping with each hour that passed. If they waited any longer, she might lose herself. Completely. He picked up the sync module and placed the first node behind his own ear. The second he handed to her. She took it gently and attached it behind her left ear. The moment the device connected, a low pulse began to vibrate through the platform. It was not painful, just present. Like a distant drum calling them toward something unseen. Mason closed his eyes as the connection began. At first, there was nothing. No sound, no image, just stillness, then a flicker, a flash. Something opened. He stood in a strange space, not fully physical, not fully light. The world around him was made of colors that shifted with emotion. Shapes moved like memories with weight. He saw pieces of Rel's mind floating beside him, fragments of her childhood, faces of people she once knew, skies that no longer existed, and battlefields soaked in ash. Her mind was not a place of peace. It was full of conflict, full of grief. Then he heard the voices. They were not human, not even fully alien. They were more like echoes trapped in time, whispering things that felt like truths and lies at the same time. He saw Rel across the distance, walking towards something dark. Her body glowed slightly in the strange air, a soft outline against the shifting storm ahead. He called out to her. She turned, smiled faintly, and reached for his hand. Walked together toward the center of the mind space. The deeper they went, the louder the voices became. They screamed. They cried. They remembered. Thousands of minds tangled in one voice that had no shape. They were not evil, just lost. Confused, trapped. At the core, they found it. A large structure. Made of threads and pulses, like a living network rooted into Rel's thoughts. This was the echo node. It beat like a second heart. Every beat sent another wave through her brain. Another signal to the past. Rel looked at it, her expression full of fear and sorrow. She told Mason this was the place where it all began, the relay that once connected millions of minds. Now it had become a prison. A broken tower holding fragments that no longer belonged. Mason asked what needed to be done. She said it must be burned from within, erased. If left untouched, the echoes would continue to grow, spreading from her to machines, to other minds, to entire systems. But destroying it would erase everything inside it. All the memories, all the knowledge, all the voices. Mason asked if she was ready. She nodded slowly. He told her he would stay with her until it was done. Rel walked forward, her hands glowing with a strange light. She pressed them against the structure. It resisted her at first, the threads wrapping around her fingers, trying to hold her in place. But she focused. Her body shook. Her breath became heavy. She shouted a word in her native tongue, and the light around her grew brighter. The structure began to crack. Voices screamed again, this time louder. They begged. They warned. They threatened. But Rel stood firm. Mason stepped beside her and placed his hand on hers. The light exploded outward. Everything went white. When Mason opened his eyes, he was back in the chamber. Alarms were ringing. The system had gone into auto shutdown. He looked around. The cables had burned out. The screens showed static. Smoke rose from the sync device. But he was alive. He turned to Rel. She lay on the platform, her body still, her chest rising faintly with each breath. Her skin was pale, but her expression was calm, peaceful. He checked her vitals. Weak, but stable. Then her eyes opened. She looked at him with eyes that were clear again. No spinning rings. No glow, just quiet depth. He asked how she felt. She said. The voices were gone. She said she could finally think, without noise. He asked if she remembered everything. She said she remembered enough. She sat up slowly, looked at the room around her. Then at him. She said, "You gave me the choice to become more than what I was. I chose to become myself. The base had suffered damage. Systems were down. Power was limited. But the worst danger had passed. In orbit above the silent planet, the sky was calm again. They boarded the last escape pod as the final systems of the base collapsed. Mason helped her into the seat, strapped her in, and launched the pod. Below them, the base broke apart, swallowed by the cold silence of space. Inside the pod, Rel leaned her head against the window, watching the stars. She whispered softly, "I do not know what I am now, but I know who I am." Mason smiled faintly. He did not reply. There was no need. The experiment was over. She had survived. And this time, the choice had been hers. The end.